Well, good evening. It is our map show, our weekly map show, and I'm really excited to have you joining me this evening. And I just want to remind everybody that's tuned in, or if you're watching this recording, that every Wednesday evening, 7 p.m. South African time, we meet to share some thoughts and ideas that I trust will inspire you to move to a level of greater impact in your community, your city, your county, your country, and your continent. And so I'm really happy to be with you tonight. I would be in no other place. And I trust that one day soon you will be joining us on this platform as well to share your story, but more importantly, your message. So welcome tonight. And tonight's topic is the hidden message. And I use that to share with you something that I saw for the first time, and I trust that as I share it with you this evening, that you're also going to see the revelation that I had. I remember I was sitting in an auditorium. It happened to be a Sunday morning, and I was listening to people singing and smiling and enjoying an early morning session. And as I was listening to and enjoying the music and the songs that were being sung, somebody stopped the show and decided to read a story from a long time back. And this story was about a blind person who had his sight restored. Now, you know, we've heard of certain names. For example, my surname, McQuirk, means son of Quirk. And of course, we have names like Johnson or Donaldson from the Scandinavian countries, which talks about somebody's son. And so we have these kind of names. And this particular person had a name which was Bartimaeus. And Bar means son of, and Timaeus means honor. Bartimaeus, son of honor. And the story goes like this, that this particular individual was actually born with an eye defect. He was, in fact, blind from birth. And so this Bartimaeus would wear a black cloak, and this black cloak would signify, in fact, tell the world that he was blind. Similar today, of course, we recognize blind people because they may, in fact, walk around looking like this, and you know that the person maybe has an eye problem, or maybe they walk around with one of those white sticks, or possibly as you see them walking along, they're bumping into things, or maybe somebody is leading them. And so we have ways to identify blind people. In those days, it was through the form of a black cloak. And I was listening to the story, and of course, I'd heard it from a young age when I attended Sunday school. I actually heard the story for the first time. And so I almost fell into that place where I thought, oh, you know, I've heard the story before. Where's a piece of paper that I can doodle on while they read this familiar story? But instead of doing that, I decided to imagine for a moment that I was actually there. I was right there in the place where this was happening. So and this is the amazing thing with our imagination. We are able to transport ourselves anywhere we choose. And I was able to go 2,000 years back in time, and I was there, and I pretended or imagined that I was one of, in fact, each of the different characters. And in the story, it goes like this, that there was the son of honor, or the Bartimaeus, who was blind his whole life, or at least up until that point, heard I realized I kind of pretended to be Bartimaeus for a moment, or let me say, I imagined that I was Bartimaeus. And I thought, if I was blind, based on what I already know about blind people, my other senses would be far sharper and better developed. So if I couldn't see, I would be able to hear far more clearly and acutely than other people. I would smell differently. I would taste differently. I would feel differently. In fact, I would be able to see people through the tips of my fingers. And so I was busy imagining all of this in the time that this individual was busy reading the story. And I thought, if I was Bartimaeus and somebody talked about a person who was blind, whose sight had been restored, I would have heard that story. In fact, people would have probably come to tell me about it. And if I heard it, I would have been eager to meet whoever it was who restored that person's sight. And so the scene, in a sense, was set for me. And then I thought, well, if I hear that the very person who actually performed this healing or this miracle was going to be walking through my town, then I would be sitting on the main road waiting for the moment that he comes past, because I certainly wouldn't want to miss it. I mean, this would be those once in a lifetime opportunities. In fact, right tonight, as we are talking and sharing, this might be your opportunity. And I just wonder how many people are missing the opportunity that they could have had. And so many times in life, we miss opportunities because we are not ready. Les Brown says it's better to be prepared for an opportunity and not have one than to have an opportunity and not be prepared. So if I was Bartimaeus, I was there sitting on the side of the main road, looking, listening, waiting for my moment. And then, of course, the day arrives. And this person who had previously performed a miracle and restored eyesight was going to be coming right through my town as Bartimaeus. And so I imagined that I was sitting there eagerly listening out for his arrival. And then, of course, the moment came. And in the distance, as Bartimaeus, I could hear the crowd, the crowd coming. Because, of course, if you are performing miracles like restoring sight and getting lame people to start walking again and the deaf are hearing and all these kind of things are happening, of course, there's going to be a crowd around you. And so I hear the crowd coming. And in the middle of the crowd is this person who's done these amazing miracles. And so for a moment, I put myself in the crowd and I see myself as one of the members in the crowd, and I'm selfishly pushing to try and get closer to this person who's performing these miracles. And I just imagine that for a moment. And as we are approaching, Bartimaeus, who happens to be sitting up ahead on the main road, we can see him over there, he starts shouting out. And I think to myself, as one of the crowd people, that I would like Bartimaeus just to shut up for a while, because I'm trying to hear what this teacher is telling me. And so maybe I would be one of the people that shouts out to Bartimaeus, "Be quiet! Can't you see we've got the well, that would be the wrong words to use because Bartimaeus is blind. But I can just imagine that people would be upset with this man calling and shouting out. And then I put myself in the shoes of Jesus himself, who's walking along and performing all these miracles. And I put myself in his position, and I think to myself from a worldly perspective. And I think, imagine if I was performing these miracles, and right here in this moment is a great opportunity for some more marketing. I've got a crowd with me. I have a blind person coming up on my left-hand side. Well, I'm going to assume he's sitting on the left. He's coming up there. This is the perfect moment. And so I'm imagining, I'm dramatizing this whole story. And so the closer I get to Bartimaeus, the more Bartimaeus is calling out. And the more the people around me are telling him to be quiet. And I kind of stop for a moment and say, hang on, guys, hold on. Hey, Bartimaeus, what would you like? Or sorry, come over here. And Bartimaeus jumps up. And I can't imagine how he did it, but he somehow kind of moves towards where Jesus is standing. And Jesus says something that just knocks the crowd flat on their backs. He says this to Bartimaeus. He says, Bartimaeus, now remember, we've all seen Bartimaeus sitting on the side of the road. He had his black cloak on. This is what he looked like. This is Bartimaeus sitting on the side of the road with his black cloak. And Jesus says to him, he says, Bartimaeus, what can I do for you? And I mean, in the crowd, the people are saying, what's going on here? Can't you see? Bartimaeus is the one who's blind, not you. And then Bartimaeus says, well, funny you should ask, but I would like to see. And then Jesus says something interesting. He says, your faith has made you well. And in that moment, I thought to myself, hang on. What's going on over here? What was the faith? What did Bartimaeus do? And I realized that while Bartimaeus was sitting on the side of the road, he was dressed like this. This was Bartimaeus sitting on the side of the road. When Jesus called him, he took his cloak off and put it down. And as he did that, he was telling the world that I am no longer a blind person. I am now a seeing person. And so when he stood in front of the healer, the miracle worker, as he stood there, he was no longer dressed as a blind person. He no longer had the identity of a blind person. He had removed that identity and exchanged it for someone who could see. And that was the step of faith that he took. And maybe tonight, maybe as you're watching this recording, as you're listening to this message, there's an identity that you have assumed. There's an identity that society has put on you. Maybe there's a name that people have called you. Maybe there's a name that you call yourself. Maybe you are identifying with someone that you are not. Maybe you're walking into the future and bumping into things because you're still dressed as a blind person. You haven't taken that step of faith that identifies you as the person you are becoming. And by the way, the person you are becoming is the person you already are. You've just got to step in faith to reveal it. And so Bartimaeus took that step of faith. And, as I was listening to this message, I suddenly realized, or not realized, but my imagination went to a whole new level. There in front of me, everyone that was involved in the singing and the whole stage turned into a white billboard. I couldn't see anyone on stage. All I could see was this big white billboard in front of me, and it had 3 sentences written clearly on this particular billboard. And the first sentence read like this: ask and you shall, yes, I can hear you, receive. Ask and you shall receive. And directly below that was the next sentence: seek and you will, yes, exactly, find. And lastly, it had the sentence, knock and the door will be opened. It goes on, unto you. And as I looked at this statement, and by the way, these 3 sentences, or this phrase, or this paragraph is repeated by people all over the world. It doesn't matter what their religious affiliation is. I mean, I've traveled to different parts, and it seems like this phrase has been passed down from generation to generation to generation. And as I was looking at this phrase, which you already know, it was as if somebody took an eraser and began to erase the text from the far right. And the sentences got shorter and shorter and shorter until there were just 3 words left on the billboard. And those 3 words were the words ask, seek, and knock. And as I looked at those 3 words, I saw the hidden message. And the hidden message was revealed as the final letters of those 3 words were removed, and the starting letter, the first letter of each of those sentences remained on the big billboard. And the 3 letters that remained were A-S-K, ask. And right now, this evening, maybe the things that you have been hoping for, the things that you've been wishing for, the things that you desperately want to receive, the things that you want to find, the doors that you want open, all of these are waiting for you just to ask. And Map for Life is a tool that empowers you to write down the very desires of your heart. And when you write down those desires, you declare the plan and purpose that God has for your life. And when you declare that plan and purpose, when you are in agreement with His plan and purpose for your life, then you have applied a principle, the principle of ask. And when you ask, you know what happens? It leads to discovery. the thing that you're looking for, that desperate desire to know your purpose without any doubt, maybe lies in just simply asking, seeking, and knocking. You've got to ask the right question, the question that produces the answer. Asking, why am I here, is the wrong question. You should be making a statement instead, and that is, here I am, and infer that you're asking the question, why? Here I am. And you know, when you change your whole state of mind by switching the words around, the why is revealed. When you seek for something, you know, people talk about Glen McQuirk is the founder of Map for Life. Why is Glen the founder of Map for Life? Because he was seeking and he found. He was looking for something and he found it. And when he found it, he declared in that moment, I have found it. And when he said, I have found it, the rest of the world said, he's the founder. And if you want to be the founder of something, you've got to seek for something. Not seek for a job, for goodness sake. Looking for someone else to give you something worthy is not going to cut it. You've got to go and seek something that connects with the desires of your heart. In fact, it is an inner journey, an inward journey. You've got to go into yourself, because the future does not lie in front of you. It lies within you. So you need to seek. And then when you knock, it's not a quiet little tap, 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 and nobody can hear. If the door doesn't open when you knock the first time, knock a second time. You know, temptation, or whoever's behind temptation, understands the principle well, and he keeps knocking. In the same way, this healer that met Bartimaeus, he said, behold, I stand at the door, and what do I do? I knock, because it's your decision to open the door. And so you and I need to apply this principle. We need to keep on knocking. And if we're not knocking hard enough, get yourself a pneumatic drill. I mean, when a pneumatic drill is operating outside your office, you want to get yourself some earmuffs or headphones or something to protect the sound because it's so irritating. And that's the persistence that you and I need when it comes to knocking. So many people say, I knocked and the door got closed. No, you didn't knock loud enough. Be persistent. Keep knocking, because one day the crack is going to appear. And all of a sudden, all resistance crumbles. And you're going to see with absolute clarity your very reason for being, the meaning of your life, the legacy that you're going to leave, the significance that's going to result, because you're going to step through that door into the very future that you were born to create. And so tonight, this moment, whatever day it is that you're watching, whatever time it is, it's your time. This is your moment. This is the beginning of you starting that asking with absolute conviction that you're going to receive the very answer that you're looking for. You're going to seek in the places where you expect to find, and you're going to knock on the doors that hold within them the very secret linked to your purpose. I hope that this slightly longer than usual message is going to be something that's going to invigorate you, that's going to build you up, that's going to get you excited for the future, because I certainly feel ready to go and ask boldly, seek with all my heart, and knock more loudly than I've ever knocked before. Because if I do that, I'm going to discover with clarity the purpose for which I have been created. And so before I invite the panel to join us this evening, I'm going to play a short video that tells you a little bit more about what Map for Life is all about. And it will be...
The key to a meaningful and successful life is knowing where you are, knowing where you want to be, and how to get there. We all need a map for our lives. Map for Life empowers people from across the world to pursue their God-given purpose with passion and perseverance for life. Map for Life is a personal development program and network that empowers people to realize and develop their unique God-given purpose by means of its structured methodology and interactive learning experiences. We want to help you achieve balance, find direction, reach your goals, and discover your purpose. Our offering consists of unique products, services, programs, and networks. Our publications guide you through the Map for Life methodology. Basic, standard, advanced, and mastery workshops are designed to equip you to identify, reach, and realize your purpose. Our online one-on-one and group coaching programs exist within an accountability framework, fully embedding the Map for Life methodology. Map for Life creates a dynamic environment where purpose-driven individuals can plug into a global community and experience functional networks designed to share with, learn from, and inspire one another. Conceived by Glen McQuirk in 1978, the Master Action Plan was finally developed and published in 1999. By 2006, Map for Life as an organization was fully trademarked and institutionalized. Our long-term vision was already established as early as 2008, with the global launch event planned for 2020. Next, we will be expanding into 200 countries across 20 languages. There are many success stories that show the real-world effectiveness of Map for Life, including those of Cape Epic rider Neil Faree and more recently, Academy Award winner Lupita Nyong'o. Our vision for the future is to be a positive global influence and reach 200 countries across the globe to empower people to use Map for Life, to enable them to achieve balance and purpose, and to become a positive force in the community, country, and globally. By touching lives and transforming people, we will not only enable individuals to identify and pursue their purpose in life, but also bring glory to God by helping them to develop an intimate relationship with their Creator. Partner with us and play an integral role in mapping the world through purpose.
Well, this is a great time, a good season to be part of Map for Life, and I'm looking forward to each of you joining us in a very powerful way. So welcome to Nico and Gustav, who have been sharing comments on our YouTube channel. I trust that you've enjoyed the show so far. And tonight joining me is Janine. I'm going to bring Janine in very quickly. Janine and I spend regular times together. And just this morning, we were busy sharing a few thoughts on the idea of your setback is a setup for your comeback. Do you remember that, Janine?
Yeah, it was a great conversation.
Maybe you want to just quickly share some of the thoughts that you shared this morning around that particular aspect.
So I just shared a story about a time where, so I work in the learning environment. It's part of what I do. And one of my clients had received a grant to place more learners than expected, but it was 20 learners. And we had to place them in 3 days because the lady had mislaid the letter. But it was just amazing how people responded to the crisis and the problem. Some of them just disappeared. Some of them the one lady started crying. The other lady disappeared. The other lady was starting to say, no, she had nothing to do with this, because nobody felt it was possible. But, you know, as a true mapper would do, I put the plan together, said, who do we need to get to help us? And we actually managed to achieve the goal, and we got the grant. But it was just interesting to see how people responded in a setback.
Yeah, I think that particular gem that you shared with us this morning about moving from disappointment to determination is such a key thing. And the reason I asked you to share it was just because the knocking, the seeking, the asking, in essence, is really about having absolute determination and not giving up. Isn't it true that people give up easily on their goals?
Yes, the minute things become difficult, people give up or, you know, change their goals. This is something I've seen. You know, somebody has this amazing goal, and when it becomes a little bit difficult, then it's, no, we're going to do something else. And it's like, but, you know, we spoke about this yesterday. I think people just sort of lose faith.
Yeah.
Because the amazing thing is, if you move forward, it's amazing how things happen and fall into place in ways that you never imagined possible. I was chatting with one of the people that we normally meet with on a Wednesday, and we spoke about Amazon. And he was on a trip somewhere on a plane, and the operations manager of Amazon sat next to him. It's just bizarre how things just happen.
You know, you talk like that, and I just getting back to one of those quotes that I referred to with Les Brown, which says it's better to be prepared for an opportunity and not have one than to have an opportunity and not be prepared. And I think that people who have clarity of vision are the ones that seem to have these coincidences, so-called, that happen. And just this morning, I was reminded again of the power of writing something down. And in essence, the Map for Life tool, and this was the revelation that I had and why I talked about the hidden message, was the Map for Life tool enables you to apply the principle of asking. ASK, ask, seek, knock. So when you're going through that whole process, you are asking those deep questions that leads to discovery. So I think that's where the real value of MAP lies. Janine, I noticed that as I was sharing that message, you were busy writing things down. Now, I don't know what you were writing down, but clearly you were feeling like there were certain things that needed to be recorded. And I don't know if there were questions or whether things that just stuck out for you. Why don't you share some of the things that, or maybe one of the things that you wrote down just to start with, or something that really inspired you during that session?
Okay, so I write things down to keep my mind in the same place. It's everybody's different. Everybody's brain is wired differently, and one of the ways I also doodle to focus, and it upsets people. But as I say, we're all different, and that's one of the things, because you were talking about people have put labels on people and identify people in a certain way and place people in certain boxes. And what happens is we begin to identify with what society is saying to us. And the truth is that we're so much more than a label. You cannot label a human being. There's just too much within us. And, you may have one specific purpose, but in order to fulfill that purpose, you have to have so much inside of you. That's, yeah. So that's one of the things I wrote down.
You just reminded me of a very inspirational America's Got Talent audition. It was by I don't know the person's name, but her stage name was Nightbird, and she made a statement at the end of her audition that said something to the effect that I am so much more than the bad things that have happened to me. And as you were talking about the label, I was just thinking for a moment, I wonder what label was placed on you, and I'm not talking about you, Janine, but just everyone that's listening right now. What was the label that was placed on you when you were growing up? Maybe your teacher gave you a label. Maybe your parents gave you a label. Maybe your siblings gave you a label. Maybe your community gave you a label. And none of those labels are your brand. It's not your brand, it's someone else's. You need to have your own brand. I think I can hear Peter talking about branding, in a sense. But I think our brand needs to speak for itself. We've talked about the idea that your name is on your flame. Your brand is what you're passionate about. It's not something that you decide to follow. It's what your heart already is following, and you just allow yourself to tag along. So this idea of that we are so much more than a label is so powerful. Janine, come tell me more. You were busy putting things down there.
Yeah, and another thing that I wrote down, you were describing the story so beautifully in different people's shoes in the situation. And Bartimaeus actually stood up and he's shouting, I want something. So now there were two things that were interesting. His was like, he was calling Jesus. And the crowd assumed he wanted his sight. But Jesus didn't assume that. He asked him, what do you want? And I do believe that we were born with a specific purpose, because it says in the word that that the Lord has placed works, he set up works that we were going to do before we were born. However, I do think Jesus was asking him, what are you ready for? Are you ready for your sight? Are you ready for your vision? Are you ready for your sight, or are you ready for your vision? Sometimes, if I think of Helen Keller now, sometimes people that are blind have a greater vision than people that are sighted. So
I remember staying at a city lodge in Cape Town in Pinelands, and I had to drive along a street that was named after Helen Keller. I was quite taken back, because I remember that quote that says, "The most pathetic person in the world is the person who has sight but no vision." Um,
Yes.
and as you're talking about that part of the story, I'll never forget a day when we were having a map cafe. By the way, if you're listening to the session, you need to plug yourself into a map cafe. There's no excuse anymore, because they're even online. Okay, so you don't have to travel, you don't have to go and do anything. You can join them online. But of course, we encourage you to join a physical group where you meet with other like-minded people. And we were having this discussion, and he was talking about the day, he was in the medical profession, and he was talking about the day that somebody walked into his office. Now he was focused on plastic surgery. And the person walked into the office, and while he was sitting there, he was already almost designing the way that he was going to change this person's look, because he could see with his own eyes the problem, and so he was already designing a new jawbone feature and everything else. And he said, before he started telling the person what he could do for him, he decided he would ask, "What would you like me to do for you?" And of course, he said, "I've got a terrible pain. I have a tooth that I need to have looked at." And he said, thank goodness he didn't go and explain how he was going to change the person's facial look. And when you were talking about it, these two words came to mind. And I don't know if it's two words or one. My spelling was never that great. But God gave us a free will. And sometimes we want him to step into our situation and perform a miracle, but we haven't exercised our free will by giving him permission. And I think to some extent, he was setting Bartimaeus up for success. He said, he was almost saying to Bartimaeus, you need to ask me before I can actually heal your sight. So I'm going to preempt it. I'm going to actually tell you to ask me by saying, what do you want? Or what do you need? Or what would you like? So that you can exercise your free will and release the power that's within me to heal you. And maybe that's just where we're at this stage. Maybe we're not exercising our free right to speak and declare that which we were created to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. Look, I'm not advocating that people try and put something on themselves that they're not, but because we do need to seek what's within.
Yeah, maybe, I remember Peter spoke last week, and there was a reference to the masks that we used to wear for a while. Some people blame it on COVID, and clearly it wasn't COVID. It was government regulations. In fact, the WHO's regulations that were written up in 2011 already, those are the things that actually caused us to wear masks. And then I thought, that mask was temporary. That mask was something that we put on, but there's a more serious mask that we wear. And that's the facade that we put forward, the one that we pretend. And like you've kind of alluded to now, we put on a label that is not who we really are, because we're actually trying to project someone who we're not to be accepted by the people around us. We're trying to pretend. And maybe Facebook and social media has just highlighted how desperate we are to be someone else other than the original that we were born to be. And yet it's the original that is so valuable. So you've touched on a very important aspect there, and that is, and I said last week, we need to explore that at a future date. Talk about the masks that we currently wear. Who are you really? So when you were talking about you're not suggesting that people should put something on, the thought that came to mind, and this is not to create any kind of image for anybody out there, but it's almost, we need to become, well, the word would be authentic, I suppose, in today's thing, but it's almost like that new insurance company that they advertise here in South Africa. Naked, I think, is what it's called. It's almost becoming, returning to your authentic self and exposing who you really are, and not hiding it anymore, and to recognize that you are indeed a priceless, unique individual in every possible way. So you've highlighted something really important about this brand. Carry on, Janine.
Yeah, and the thing is, if you're wearing a mask and you're not authentic, people are naturally uncomfortable around you. When you are yourself, even if yourself is not fully acceptable to the normal society, the group where you are supposed to fit will accept you. I mean, I always say that humans are made in many flavors, like ice cream, and not everybody likes licorice ice cream, or not everybody likes caramel ice cream. Some people find it too sweet. But the thing is, we're all different flavors. And if we're authentically ourselves, we will attract the people that like the type of ice cream we are. Because the type of ice cream we are is what purpose we have and how we're going to serve the world. And those type of people should be together.
My favorite dessert, my favorite dessert is fruit salad. My grandmother used to make this fruit salad. I mean, it was just amazing. It had pineapple, orange, it had pawpaw, it had, and of course the best was that nice thick farm cream. I grew up on a farm. We used to go and separate the milk and the cream. So we had fresh cream every day. It was there. So just putting that cream on, that was my favorite dessert. Yet whenever I went to school, my teacher used to say, you can't add apples and oranges. And I thought, how could you say that? Every single Sunday, my grandmother does just that. And it tastes incredible. And I think we sort of grow up in an environment where you're almost forced to like people, engage with like people. And in MAP, our goal is to engage with people that are different. The more diverse the group, the greater the perspective that we can have. We can see things from a different point of view. And so when you talked about ice cream, I think caramel was my favorite. I used to, when I was still at school, if I was able to save up 50 cents, then I would buy myself a caramel coated ice cream. But for the other days, I'd have to buy just an icicle at 8 cents. back in those days, like, I don't know what you can buy for that kind of money today, but it was just a reminder that we are all different, that we are all unique, and we need to be that. And of course, when we're with our closest friends, we can, as I can't do this anymore, you can. We can let our hair down, and just be ourselves, isn't it? I want to take some of the comments that we have on the screen from Nico and Gustav and so on. Let's just go and take a look and see what they have to say, and maybe we can talk about that for a moment. Gustav says persistence is key. And I think we kind of talked about that. Do you remember the little discussion about persistence? What is your comment on
that? Persistence is what gets you to the goal. It's discipline. We can do all sorts of things, but you've got to be disciplined and persist to achieving what you want to achieve, and it will happen. No matter how uncomfortable and uneasy it may become. In fact, when it gets very uncomfortable, you're probably very close to.
I was remembering my time at varsity, when Anne and I were courting, going out, nobody had to remind me to phone her. Nobody had to remind me that I had that we had a movie night. Nobody had to remind me, because I had this vision, and the vision created the discipline necessary to stick to my commitments. And so maybe that discipline that produces the persistence ties back to the purpose and vision, and purpose and passion and all those things. So Gustav, thank you so much for sharing that message. Let's go and see what Nico put down here. I hope we can read his message. Ask. He's talking just about Joyce Meyer today. Was also talking about this in her post. Again, just reinforcing the importance of persistence. It's so nice when you have confirmation from different sources, isn't it, Janine?
Yes, and it's I always find that every week we have a theme on MAP, but everything that I deal with that week is part of the theme. But Nico actually said something in his thing. He said, take the first step. And I can't emphasize that enough. If you take the first step, you'll find the next step will open up in front of you. Even if you can only see that first stair, just step onto it, because you'll see the next thing will happen. So
that is powerful. That is powerful. Thanks for pointing that out. That was right at the end of that sentence. And yeah, they say the first step is the most difficult, but I don't necessarily agree with it being difficult. I think it's just not taken. People just don't know, and maybe the first step is simply to do what we're talking about tonight, and that is to ask. In other words, write it down, make it plain, make it clear. There was an interesting a guy with a very fancy name, and I don't know if I pronounce it correctly or not. Habakkuk was his name, and he recorded something that went like this: write your vision down plainly, or in fact, write it down on tablets of stone, so that those who see it may run with it. And then after that, he says, because if you do, it will certainly come to pass. And maybe just writing it down as the start could be the next step for each of us to actually take, is just to go and write it down. Find a piece of paper. Even better, use your map. Go and write it in your map. Put it down. And maybe that's a point, is that when we meet on Wednesday evenings, I'm just thinking now, when we meet on Wednesday evenings, you should actually get your map for life and go and record some of the things inside there, so you have it with you. Let's go. We've got a Ngwadi from, by the way, Nico and Gustav are both from Pretoria, so they almost next door to me in a sense. And then we have Ngwadi all the way from East London, my hometown. And he's a family friend, used to visit us on the farm. In fact, I met him on our farm for the first time. And him and my father used to have these long chats about farming. And of course, it's always nice to hear from you, Ngwadi. What does he say? Janine, can you read that on your side?
It is important to love ourselves before we expect others to love us. We sometimes label ourselves before being labeled, i.e. by talking negative about ourselves. Oh, wow, that is so true.
That is powerful, isn't it? I mean, I'm so glad you read that, because hearing it and seeing it on screen at the same time, this makes it so much more powerful. I mean, that is a wow. So what he's saying is our self-talk is actually, maybe there's another word that's just come to mind as you were reading that, is our self-thought. The things we think, which ultimately become our talk, I mean, Ngwadi, you you need to put a talk together, my friend. This is something that I think is really, really powerful. So our words that we speak could be the very obstacle that's keeping us where we are. That's a very powerful idea.
Yeah.
And I love. Have you got something else to say about that, Janine?
Yeah, and thoughts are things. Thoughts become things. And sometimes the way we think changes, the way we act, the way we respond to the world, and the way we expect the world to respond to us. And it's so limiting, it's I can't emphasize it enough. I experienced for many years of my life, I believe that what people had said about me would limit me completely. And when I chose to step away from that and away from that thinking pattern, it's easy to fall back into it, but it definitely, I could say I lost a number of years of my life because of thinking about these things that were negative. And I wasn't saying it, I was just thinking it, and it was impacting me.
Yeah, I used many years ago. There was a program on one of the. I don't watch for those who are watching tonight. Television. Television is something that is I desperately wanted when it first came out in our country in 1976. I pestered my parents day after day because all my friends had television. It was probably the worst thing I ever did in my life, was to pester my parents to put a television set in our home. I just think of how many hours of my life were robbed. And gratefully, for the last 10 or 12 years, the television has not robbed me of my time. But I remember there was one of these tattoo type programs. And while watching, I think they had things like Miami Ink or something of that nature. those who are listening will probably know what I'm talking about. Maybe you've seen such a program. But as I was watching that program, I realized that our thoughts are being tattooed into our brain. I mean, so I used the letters TH ink, TH ink. What you think you are, what you think you are. It's not even what you think you're becoming. It's what you think you actually are right there and then. And Ngwadi's message here is just so powerful. So that's a talk coming. So Ngwadi, start getting your paper out there. Nico has written something else. Janine, I'm going to ask you to read that again. I know that I've got more eyes than you, but I think yours are more effective.
Sometimes we make asking more complex than it should be. I ask very difficult, but I love it when my son, 6 years old, asks me what he needs, even if I already know what he needs. Yeah, that is powerful. God is waiting for us to ask.
I was taught as a young person to accept whatever gift was given to me, to be grateful and thankful, especially when it came to birthday times and Christmas and so on. To the point, and then when I was at Sunday school, I was taught that God knows everything you need before you even ask. So with those two teachings, I felt it was disrespectful to ask God because he already knew what I needed, not realizing that the act of asking released him to give me what he already knew that I wanted. And Nico has just brought that memory straight back to me, because anybody who's had children, so often you know what they're going to ask you before they ask. You know what their needs are before they even know themselves. And so that is just such an important reminder that maybe our future can be unlocked just by that question of asking. I'm going to put up one last comment, and Janine, you can I think it continues on what we've just been saying over here. And of course, you might recognize that person.
Yes. What you think you are, very true. It's beautiful.
So thank you, Anne, for sharing that with us this evening. Maybe that's the right place for us to stop and to just go and reflect on the thoughts that we're having. I have another comment, and maybe you can see. I see Colton has shared something on the chat room. Do you have access to the chat room on your side, Janine?
I can see it. I actually saw the comment, and I just wanted to share it as well.
So
Colton wrote, interestingly, just thinking about it, at age 24, my final year German lecturer told me, Mr. Colton Franciscus, you are going to be you first, then who you'd like to be. Amazingly similar to the utterances of my dad. It's a very powerful one, that you're going to be you first. And so many people are not you. So I think it's beautiful.
Colton, thanks for sharing your wisdom with us. Or should I say, it's actually your dad's wisdom so freely with us. And we're going to be starting a story time. We're supposed to be starting it now already. So Colton, just you're going to have to be that first guy to do a story time session with us. Janine, thank you so much for joining the discussion this evening and making it such a pleasure. And it's just so nice to chat about things that are so important to purpose. And you certainly brought out a richness to the message, and also just allowed us to, maybe those people who are listening to this recording or listening to the session, just to take that little moment to reflect on some of the things that maybe we are currently doing that could be detrimental to our future. Things that actions that we have been taking that could be limiting. Tonight, or this moment, is a time for us to change that. And let's get out there. Thank you so much, Janine, and to all those who've participated this evening. And if you are watching this recording, please share your comments. We'd love to hear them. And if you haven't yet got your map for life for 2023, make sure you get yourself a copy. I'm not saying that because I have them or put them together. I just, over the last 23 years, have seen the incredible impact that writing down your dreams can have in your life. You need to get yourself a map so that you can have absolute clarity. So have a wonderful week. To Peter, who's enjoying the bush and the lions around him there in the Kruger National Park or somewhere in that vicinity. We missed you tonight. We always like to have you as part of our team. So have a wonderful birthday celebration. It's just so great to have Peter, who's been involved for so long, and all the best for your cafe tomorrow morning, Janine. I think you have yours bright and early, 6:30 in the morning. And for the rest of you, make sure you tie in with your MAP cafe. Good night, Janine. Good night, everyone.
Good night, Glen. Thank you.